Yep, it's now live on YouTube.
Okay, well, welcome to this virtual cabinet panel on the environment meeting that's been conducted with Chancellor's offices at various locations, communicating in audio, video and online. There's also an opportunity for the public and the press to listen to and view the proceedings. And we have some contributors from various organisations with us here to provide input and feedback. Before the meeting starts, I'd like to invite the committee member and scrutiny officer to explain how the proceedings will work and to take a roll call to confirm that we're all here and in attendance. Brilliant.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll start with our roll call. Just your surnames, if that's okay. Councillor Allen. Absent. Councillor Cowell. Also absent. Councillor Davies.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Dingley. No. Councillor Hoskins is joining us later. Is that correct, Councillor Jarvis?
I understand, so yes.
Okay. Councillor Jarvis.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Councillor Morris.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. And Councillor Hewson.
Yeah.
Thank you. I can see Councillor Allen's just joined us. Can you confirm that your audio is working?
Yeah, I'm here. Hi, Will.
Thank you very much. Officers, Ruben Iovu.
Present.
Georgina Chapman.
Present.
Thank you. And Daryl Simmons on IT. Our two presenters, Ludovico Nocco.
Yeah, present.
Thank you. And Annie Sander. I cannot see yet. And members of the public in no particular order, John Webb.
Yep.
Thank you. And Julia Sonander.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Please note that the meeting is being streamed live onto YouTube and recorded via Zoom. Extracts from the previous remote/partly remote meetings protocol are included with the agenda for guidance, and the full version is available on the Council's website, which includes information regarding live streaming, noise interference, the rules of debate, voting, and part 2 items. Councillor Muir, I can see you've got your hand up. Is that because I did not call you at the roll call?
Yes.
Sorry about that. You are probably not on my list. But thank you very much. Are there any other questions before we start the meeting? No. I will hand over to the chair, Councillor Jarvis.
Thanks very much. So we start with apologies for absence. And I'm aware we have apologies from Adam Ruggiero-Chettier, who is being substituted by Mike Hewson, and we have apologies from Val Bryant. Are there any other apologies? No. Okay. Minutes of the previous meeting, which you've all seen. We don't actually have to approve them. We're not allowed to approve them. So all we need to do is note them. Are we happy to note the minutes of the previous meeting? Yep. Okay, right. So I'd like to welcome the members of the public and our speakers here this evening. In fact, I'd like to welcome you all here this evening. And thank you for your attendance. So in accordance with the Council's policy, the meeting's been audio recorded as well as filmed. The audio recordings will be available to view on ModGov and the film recording via the NHDC YouTube channel. And members are reminded to make declarations of interest before an item. The details are about the reminder and the speaking rights are set out in the agenda. Notification of other business. There isn't any other business, which moves us on to item 6, an information note on the work programme and the current status of the action tracker. So Ruben Azayo, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to skip to the programme for the cabinet panels for the rest of the year and update you on the actions trackers where I can. So last time in June we had a discussion about topics for upcoming meetings, and we put together a draft there on that first page of Appendix A on what those meetings would look like. So for this evening, we're going to have the heading for the discussion is leadership and behaviour change. So we've got the presentations as outlined beforehand. The 7th of September will be around renewable energy generation. 16th of November will be around waste minimisation, and 22nd of February will be the adaptation to climate change. So I'm looking for panel's agreement to that tonight. And then I'm going to just quickly run through, as I say, the actions that I can update you on the action tracker.
Should we just agree the work program before you do
Yes,
that?
sorry.
Is
Sure.
everyone happy with the work program? I think that should be the subjects that we decided were top of our priority list at the last meeting, arranged in an order that seemed to be convenient. Is everybody content with that? Yep. Okay. Right. So that's agreed. Then thanks, Ruben. I'd like to carry on with the action tracker.
Thank you. So I'll draw your attention in what we've done on the action tracker. Now we've listed all of the ongoing actions at the beginning and then completed actions towards the end to make it a little bit clearer. So I'm just going to run through the ones where I can update you. So EP35, we talk about the county council to increase signage of being more litter aware, which it does say that Councillor Hone in his county council capacity would do. But I'd also like to update the members that you may recall that Councillor Jarvis led a campaign about don't be a tosser in July of 2020. So I think we are progressing that. You may remember that one. So I thought I'd throw that in there. EP38 talks about the encouragement of the use of recyclable cups at district events. Did a little bit of research on this one, and there was a statement of licensing policy which came out in November of 2020. It was adopted in 2021, which, although it is there are 4 licensing objectives in that policy, there can be some environmental considerations placed there. So there was quite a lot of encouragement around not using glassware actually being prohibited, and to use compostable or biodegradable drinking vessels, food trays and cutlery items. Making sure they had waste management plans to get rid of inappropriate recycling schemes there, and the encouragement of using less use of vehicles to attend to attend festivals, and to make sure those attendees were using shuttles from railway stations or car sharing, that sort of thing. So I thought I'd bring that to the panel's attention. EP40, we actually have organisation details for reusing furniture and household items on our website. So I might suggest that one, actually, we've completed that one because we've highlighted where people can go for those sorts of things. I'd also say the same thing about EP41, which is the monthly education campaigns. We do now have a shared waste awareness officer who's doing that work alongside our own eco briefings that the policy team are putting out across various media of the council. EP46, there's a little bit of progress there around anti-idling, particularly in regard to the taxis now. We are encouraging the use of cleaner and low emission vehicles for Hackney carriages and private hire vehicles. And we're actually offering a subsidised licence fee for electric or hybrid vehicles. And there, I think we're looking to move to a requirement where all new vehicles and those to be replaced from 2028 onward would be ultra low emission vehicles as well. EP47, we picked this up on last month, around smart card options for buses use in the district. I had a chat with Daniel Washington, and he is part of the Interlink Enhanced Partnership, and that use of smart cards is currently being investigated as part of one of the requirements of the latest national bus strategy. He doesn't have a date as yet, but once he knows, he'll let me know, and I'll inform the panel of that. And then the last two I wanted to update you on were EP50 and 51, and that was around cycling networks in North Hertfordshire. Some of the members may be aware that the district councils are being requested to draft a local cycling and walking infrastructure plan, and there'll be a stakeholder event in the summer, which I think members will be invited to. As soon as I get that date, I'll get that out to you as well. And I think that brings me to the end of my update. Thank you very much, Chair. Happy to take questions.
Okay, thanks so much, Ruben. Questions for Ruben? Gerald.
Thank you, Chairman. This may have already been covered, but EP38, second page, encourage the use of cyclable cups at district events. As I say, this may have already been covered, but I'm on licensing. When we grant a license for some open air event, I just wonder whether we have the power to, as one of the conditions of the license, that cups are disposable. sorry, recyclable.
Ruben, I think you said that there was something happening about that, did you not?
I did.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
And that's fine. I spoke to Steve Cobb about this one, and I think there are 4 licensing objectives, and we can't normally mandate that. So the encouragement is there to use glassware, which is, I think, is prohibited, and then the policy encourages the use of those recyclable cups at district events. But Steve would have the detail of that one. That's what I've taken from his updated policy.
Thank you.
Okay, so doing what we can do within the limitations of the legal framework, I guess that. Julia, you wanted to raise a question.
Actually, I just wanted to raise a point, which is that there is a meeting on the LSWIP for North Herts on the 15th of July. So I don't know that we're waiting for the summer. I think it might be worth councillors knowing that lots of community groups have been invited to an LSWIP event on the 15th of July by the County Council.
15th of July might pass as summer some years, mightn't it?
Well, no, it's not that. Yes, it is summer, but I'm just saying that Ruben said that he would advise when he knew the date, and I thought I would just share the date because I
That's
think we didn't know the
very
date.
useful. Yeah, it occurred to me that I thought I'd heard a date, but I couldn't remember what it was.
Well, there we are.
Yeah, that's useful to know. And
I
I
didn't
think
get invited, Julia.
it's probably just community organisations that have been invited at this stage. I think I'm
Okay.
struggling to remember. I've seen details of lots of events of that sort, and I'm trying to distinguish one from another. But I think that's useful to know, and it clearly is important because a lot of the other things that we've talked about in terms of walking and cycling, we're told, are dependent upon the local cycling and walking infrastructure plan. So it's important that that gets underway and we get the right sort of inputs into that. So thanks very much. Are there any other questions for Ruben? No. So Annie Sander has joined us since we did the initial introduction. So welcome, Annie. And Sue Lyons as well. Welcome, Sue. Okay, so then the next item we are going to deal with is an update on the Hertfordshire Climate Change and Sustainability Partnership. And hopefully I'm not covering too much what Georgina was just about to say when I tell you that that's a partnership of all the district and borough councils in Hertfordshire, along with the county council and the local enterprise partnership, to look at shared interests in terms of climate change and other sustainability issues, which has been running, I guess, for a bit over a year. With one representative, one councillor and a lead officer from each council. So I won't say any more about it, Georgina, because I may just trample all over your presentation if I do, so I'll hand over to you now.
From the deck. Okay. Okay. Can you all see?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So the theme of tonight is kind of around behaviour change. So I thought I'd do a presentation around leadership and behaviour change. So about North Herts and also about HCCSP. So I'm going to kind of focus around the 2 main channels through which North Herts looks to achieve action around climate change in the environment. So we have our own climate change strategy, which is in the top right, and then we have the HCCSP, which is the Hertfordshire Climate Change and Sustainability Partnership. So if I begin with our own strategy, so our own climate change strategy recognises that firstly, our own estate is, relatively small in terms of carbon emissions, water usage or available land for biodiversity gains in North Herts. And secondly, that local authorities have a leadership role to play in stimulating community-led action and encouraging behaviour change, and that's really key for kind of achieving our wider district net zero target. So we have 3 strategic priorities as part of our climate change strategy. The first is just about our own estate, so reducing carbon emissions from our own estate, but it's the second and third ones here that I'm going to go through. So enabling carbon savings and inspiring the community, because these 2 have actions in them that pertain to behaviour change a bit more. So enabling carbon savings. So that's around ensuring that our policies enable citizens and businesses to reduce their emissions. So we're looking to make sure that we kind of open up opportunities and make it easier for people to change their behaviour. And I think Ludo is going to touch on this in his presentation when he talks about the kind of three key conditions for successful behaviour change, one of them being opportunities. So that's really what this one is about. And then the inspiring the community, that's about encouraging citizens and businesses to take action to reduce their carbon emissions. So that's around kind of motivating and inspiring. So I thought I'd go through a few actions that relate to behaviour change that sit under each of those strategic priorities. So the first one, under enabling carbon savings, we have progressing the implementation of a better cycle network in North Herts, which would link up the district and also link us with areas outside the district. Ensuring that master plans and planning applications for new development are designed around active travel, so around cycle paths, around pathways for walking rather than roads for cars, with the ultimate aim of creating a walkable neighbourhood for people. And lastly, working with other public and private entities or partners to improve provision of electric vehicle charging. So all of these are kind of around creating infrastructure which would then make it easier for people to decide to change their behaviour, be that to, you know, get rid of a car, to get an electric vehicle, or to decide to walk or cycle a bit more than they used to. So the next one, inspiring the community. So some behaviour change related actions under this strategic priority. There's enabling residents to assess their carbon emissions, to compare them with the district and with best practice. So Annie's here tonight and she's going to kind of talk about some work she did on this in this kind of vein with Cambridge, where they've created a carbon footprint calculator for their residents to use, and then a charter that they can sign to pledge to reduce their emissions. And we're interested in either replicating something like that or promoting something like that for our residents to encourage that behaviour change. And then there's encouraging residents to make behaviour changes by highlighting positive actions that can be taken and informing them of more environmentally friendly options. So my colleague Alice in the policy team, she's been creating these how to help the environment monthly eco action pieces. So we've had them on different themes like reducing water usage. We've had it on heating. I think this month's one is called something like things you didn't know could help, habits you didn't know could help. And so we were initially promoting those just internally, but now they're going out on our social media as well to hopefully try and encourage some behaviour change and raise some awareness. And then lastly, running food waste awareness programmes. So as Ruben mentioned, we do now have a waste awareness officer at North Herts. So he's doing lots of work around a food waste pledge that's on our website if you haven't already found it. And also there's a new Facebook group which is called Reducing Waste Together. So yeah, those are some of the behaviour change related actions in our own climate change strategy. And now I'm going to move on to HCCSP. So Steve went through some of this, but yeah, it's a Hertfordshire Climate Change and Sustainability Partnership. So it brings together the 10 district councils of Hertfordshire, plus the county council, plus the LEP, the Hertfordshire Local Enterprise Partnership. And the thinking behind it is that there are numerous issues relating to climate change and the environment where it would be quite difficult for an individual authority to make a significant impact by themselves, but that kind of coming together, you have a much greater chance of doing so. So it therefore has the purpose to work collaboratively to tackle and deliver action on climate and environmental issues in Hertfordshire. It has 4 key priorities currently identified, and it has a respective subgroup for each of those priorities. So at the moment, those are water, biodiversity, carbon reduction and transport. And each of those subgroups has an authority that leads on it. So water is led by Three Rivers, actually. Carbon reduction is led by Hertsmere. Transport is led by East Herts, and at North Herts, we lead the biodiversity subgroup. And our transport officer, Daniel Washington, he does sit on the transport subgroup as well. So those subgroups go away and they produce strategic action plans on their priority topic. And then the idea of the action plans is that the actions focus on things which are in the gift of local authorities to either deliver themselves or to get somebody else to deliver, or things that local authorities can influence. So after that, the action plan will go through a process of stakeholder engagement to aid its development further, and then it will be adopted. So this is a little diagram that I did up to hopefully make the structure a bit clear. So in the middle, you can see HCCSP, which is a member-led group. So typically it'll be the executive member for environment that attends it, though sometimes it's a leader of a council that attends it. And then above that, you've got the Hertfordshire Leaders Group. So that's, you know, all the leaders of all the Hertfordshire councils, and they delegate work down to HCCSP, and then HCCSP makes recommendations up to them or feeds back to them. And then below HCCSP, you've got HSOG, which is Hertfordshire Sustainability Officers Group. I sit on that officer group, as does Ruben. And so we get delegated work from HCCSP, and then we feed back to them. And then over on the right, you've got the subgroups. So officers that sit on HSOG kind of siphon off into these 4 subgroups, and we go away and we produce these strategic action plans, which then go back to HCCSP for approval. I hope that makes sense. And so HCCSP and behaviour change. So as I said, the idea of the SAPs, the strategic action plans, is that they focus on actions which realistically local authorities could make some difference to, be it through delivery or through influencing other people. And if you're thinking about influencing other people, you're going to want to think about engaging with community groups, businesses, residents, the voluntary sector, to achieve the shared goals that we have around climate change and the environment in Hertfordshire. And so stimulating and facilitating behaviour change is recognised by HCCSP as a key part of achieving those goals. So I thought I'd just take you through some of the behaviour change related actions that are in each of those strategic action plans for each of the priority topics. So for our own biodiversity strategic action plan, we have an action around developing a communication plan around how to best engage the community. So the action plans are quite high level, they're strategic, as you might expect. And so we've had, this won't be for us to do, but we've had quite a few conversations with our subgroup around what the communication plan would involve. So it's things like, we're thinking to promote no mow campaigns, or communications to encourage residents to make their gardens more wildlife friendly, encouraging district allotmenters to grow peat free and pesticide free. And some work that's going to be done next is around trying to figure out who would be best placed to deliver this action plan, whether there's expertise or capacity within the authorities themselves, or whether we need to engage with, you know, a wildlife charity to get that communication plan done. So next, the transport strategic action plan. So some of their actions around behaviour change include working with large employers and schools to develop these low carbon travel plans to be adopted, kind of having a double hit behaviour change campaign by having a campaign targeted at the health benefits of active travel, as well as the environmental benefits of active travel, to promote that change in behaviour. And then developing information and behavioural change campaigns to inform residents about the poor air quality risks and what they can do on a personal level to deliver change in that area. And then carbon reduction and water. So the carbon reduction subgroup have a plan to look to launch a county-wide information and behaviour change campaign to encourage citizens to reduce their energy consumption in everyday life, and also to deliver a carbon reduction pledge that businesses and organisations would sign up to, which would commit them to 3 strong actions. And then for the water action plan, they plan to educate the next generation on the need to save water and protect chalk streams, which I think will involve working with schools around some kind of behaviour change, and also devising a county-wide education campaign on saving water and sorting out leaks. Those are the actions that are in each of those priority areas that pertain to behaviour change. But the next idea is also to create a separate subgroup for behaviour change itself that will deal with all of these behaviour change related actions, and also pick up behaviour change related actions that don't really fit comfortably under any of these 4 priority areas at the moment. So that's the end of the presentation, but I thought I'd also give a brief update on where we are with the biodiversity strategic action plan, since we're leading on that. So we produced a draft biodiversity strategic action plan, which we took to HCCSP in March, and they approved that draft and said that we could go out to stakeholder engagement. So from April through May, we engaged with stakeholders, and that included the Wildlife Trust, Woodland Trust, local authority planners and green space managers, Herts Ecology, Countryside Management Services, Butterfly Conservation, Chilterns Conservation Board. I'm sure there's more, but those are the ones that are on the top of my head. So we engage with those. We've had all the comments in now, and then we're combing through them and making the relevant changes to the action plan. And then the next thing we're doing is identifying who will be responsible for monitoring and delivering each action that's on the plan. And then after that, it will go to be adopted. And there's 2 actions which are already being progressed that are in the plan, which I thought I'd just highlight. One is a biodiversity baseline. So that will involve using remote sensing and other technologies to kind of look across Hertfordshire as a whole and give a biodiversity unit score to different pieces of land in line with Natural England's biodiversity metric. So yeah, each piece of land will get a unit score, and that will enable us to kind of maximise opportunities that come up as a result of the Environment Bill in the autumn, where net gain from development will become mandatory. So we can kind of look at a site and tell a developer what level of biodiversity, if you like, it has, and so what they need to contribute. And then the second action that's currently already being progressed is a audit of local authority green spaces to identify areas like verges or like on the edge of a football pitch or something where biodiversity could be supported or enhanced. So those 2 are already underway. Yeah.
Okay, thanks so much, Georgina. That was a very good introduction to what we're doing in some areas and what HCCSP is doing. I think on the last point, it's just worth mentioning, in fact, the general point about HCCSP is that different councils have got to different stages in various of these things. And the objective is to get more done by working together and make sure that we don't land up in a situation where we proceed at the pace of the slowest, which wouldn't be helpful. But there are many areas where it's more sensible to solve problems once than it is to solve them 11 times in Hertfordshire. One of the areas where we are ahead of the others is in terms of the biodiversity audit that Georgina mentioned, which we have done and I identified and started to implement the results of. That means that we miss out on the HCCSP activity there, but I believe we get something else from HCCSP in compensation for that.
Yeah, I think they're because we'd already had our green spaces assessed and other councils hadn't. I think St Albans had as well. So I think us and St Albans are now going to get some support from CMS on implementing some of what was identified in the action plan while everybody else catches up.
Oh, good. Okay, I noticed Keith Hoskins has joined us during the presentation. Welcome, Keith.
Sorry, I'm late. Thank you very much.
All right. Good evening. Questions or comments? Michael, Mira.
Yes, thank you, Chair. We mentioned EV charging points. We could do a lot more as a district council by campaigning to make sure that wherever people travel and stay for a particular time, there's charging points, like supermarkets. All our car parks in North Herts, I know some have got charging points. Supermarkets, I know Tesco's have got to. Our swimming pools and leisure centres, Letchworth Rugby Club and Hitchin Football Club, station car parks. We should use our power in a nice way to try and get all these non-council organisations to put EV charging points in, and it would be nice if we can supplement them in some way if there's any government money around. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Gerald.
Thank you, Chairman. Georgina, just so I can just understand how you make a difference with the things you're describing. Are you the person that basically brings all these groups together, sets it all up? Is there a team of you? How does it actually physically happen? Do you understand my question?
Kind of. I'll try. So is it worth me sharing my structure again?
Sorry, I understood your structure.
Yeah, okay, understood.
Are you at the top of it, bringing all these people together and saying you do this and you should have a team for that and so on?
For the biodiversity group, for the biodiversity subgroup, I guess we kind of are, because North Herts leads the biodiversity subgroup. So for that, we sort the meetings, we drafted the action plan with the input of others, but we drafted it, and we're now going through it, kind of looking to identify who will be responsible for each action. So in that sense, yes, but not for the other subgroups. And we've obviously had to get agreement for a lot of it. It's not just been a case of us kind of saying you're doing this, you're doing that. We have had to get agreement.
So you say we, so there's more than one of you organising this.
So North Herts leads the biodiversity group. So usually it will be between Ruben, myself, and my colleague Alice who will be doing that. Sorry.
No,
I think the thing, Gerald, about all these environmental issues is they all have impacts across much of the organisation. So in order to succeed, we need the many bits of the organisation to each do their piece. And I think that's it's important that gets coordinated, but everybody needs to buy in. Michael, you've still got your hand up. Is that a legacy hand? Yes, it is. Ruben.
I was just to sort of come in on the back of Georgina's comment. The partnership was set up by the county council when they declared their climate emergency, and the environmental impact had a greater focus for the county council, and that those 4 subgroups were chosen because they said this is where we can make the most impact across the county and the district areas, and then that work came down and they chunked it up into those 4 subgroups. Because if you look at all of the different subgroup actions, there's about 30 different actions, so it's quite wide ranging, and they couldn't all do it in one go. So they said, well, look, like anything, if you co-design something and you have ownership of it, you will make those changes in your own area. So that they wanted to involve the district councils in that way. I think it's worked pretty well, actually.
Hey.
Yeah, apologies if I've missed this because I was late, but have we undertaken, or would it be possible for us to undertake an audit of electric vehicle charging points to follow on from what Michael Muir was talking about across the district?
I think that's a very interesting suggestion.
I think it would be quite useful and show our determination to actually push that out as a policy if we were to do an audit of some of the private places.
Ruben, did you want to come back on that? Or is your hand the legacy one?
No, I did want to come back. Thank you.
Right.
2 things. One, I know that Daniel and others in that team were working on a parking strategy before the pandemic, and I know that they were also working on a feasibility thing. I don't know the details of that, but I can find out and come back to you and let you know.
Yeah, I mean, I know there's been a lot of work done in terms of what we can do in more public realm EV chargers, and I know that there is some need to work with the county council if it's on the street, but there are other public realm places, and I know that there were some bids made for funding for some pilots of that, and I think one of those was not successful, but there's some others still being pursued. But I think the point that both Michael and Keith have made is, can we find out what's there that's not in the public realm? And it may be that Daniel already knows that, already has that information. But I think in terms of our trying to lead people in the right direction, that's perhaps a useful thing to do that might not be too difficult. So perhaps we could look into the feasibility of that. Okay, so John Webb had a question, and then Sue. John.
Yep. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about electric vehicles. And the biggest is that everybody understands what they are and what it's like to run one. And I think that is certainly not the case. I think that a starting point would be for officers and even councillors to get to know the realities, the current realities of electric vehicle charging. Really, it's only where people are arriving long distance, meaning 100 miles or more, and going to stop for at least an hour, but not more than 4, that the need arises to recharge away from home. Now, I'm discounting lamppost charging and the like, because it hasn't happened, and also because topping up at supermarkets and the like really is not an answer unless one's come for part of a day. The odd hour of shopping doesn't do much at the moment. I just wanted to say that there's so much misunderstanding. I don't know where to begin, but I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, thanks very much. I think it's interesting. I had a discussion with someone who has an electric vehicle, who has no charging at home because they have no off-road parking, and so they charge at their place of work or where they're visiting. And I think there are some interesting issues about how we make it usable for a larger section of the population.
Yeah.
And everyone's moved around on the screen. Sue, you had your hand up, I think. You're muted.
Mute. Right, okay. Diane Ketcher and myself have been very involved with the biodiversity survey and talking a lot to Andrew Mills about what's happening in North Herts, and that's been really helpful. I'm interested really in a problem which seems to be cropping up about the interface between North Herts District Council's grass verges and Herts County Council. And also there are also issues with people like Settle who also own grass verges, and there doesn't seem to be any joining up to actually make sure that the mowing is coordinated, because at the moment it doesn't seem to be. There seem to be occasions when we believe that there's areas which are not being mowed, but in point of fact they are. It doesn't seem to be totally, I don't know, people aren't quite at ease with it yet. I mean, I think it's terrific that it's happening, but we do need to be moving on it, particularly with Herts County Council.
Yes, I mean, the simplistic answer to who mows what is, at the moment in the towns, the district mows everything, some on its own behalf, some on the county council's behalf, and some on Settle's behalf. Outside the towns, the county council cuts the grass at the side of the road, but the county council only does conservation cutting in a very small number of places. Most of them in Hertfordshire are in North Herts, but it's I think it's 19 locations across the county. And I think one of the things that's happened this year is that the grass has grown a lot everywhere. So it's kind of, at the moment, it's kind of difficult to distinguish between the places where the grass is supposed to be being cut shorter and those where we're trying to leave it longer, because they're both longer. And we've been thanked for leaving the grass, for not cutting the grass in a few places where that actually wasn't the intention. But given that people like it, that maybe give us a clue as to where we could do it next year. But there's been, as I think Andrew Mills will tell you if you speak to him, the grass growth this year has been exceptional everywhere. So that's kind of muddied the water a bit in terms of where we're trying to do things differently. But I agree with you. The county council pretty much lets the district, within certain parameters, decide how it cuts the grass in the towns, but they cut all the grass once you get beyond the towns at the side of the road.
Okay, can I follow up briefly? Sure. There is now a steering group going ahead with a Green Festival in Letchworth on September the 11th, and realizing now that North Herts is, the local area is doing the biodiversity lead, it would be great to actually have some representation at the festival from Georgina and anybody else who'd like to actually sort of push it a bit. We would welcome that as one of our stalls. So can I just leave that with you?
We've talked about that, and what I think we need to do is, if you can get in touch with it, Ruben, is it best if Sue gets in touch with you initially?
Yep.
But both Ruben and Sarah Kingsley, who heads up the council's communication function, are aware of this and need to find out a bit more about what it is you're trying to do, so we can sort out what we need to do appropriately.
Right.
Are there any more questions for Georgina? No, thank you very much. Well, thanks so much, Georgina. I think that was a really good summary of both what we're trying to do and also what HCCSP is doing. So now we move on. We've now got Ludovic Nocco from the Herts County Council's Behavioural Change Unit. And Nocco, you're going to give, Mr. Nocco, you're going to give us a presentation about behavioural change, I guess, from a technical point of view. Is that correct?
Yeah. So what is behavioral science, and what are the tools that we use to change behaviors, basically?
Okay, thanks so much.
Yeah. So
yeah, there you go.
Show my screen, 1 second. While I share the screen, I apologize for any screams that might come, because Italy is playing Spain at the moment, so I apologize. I promise they'll come from other rooms, not this room. But so, yeah, can you all see the slides?
Yes.
Yeah, we can see them.
Yeah. Right. So the objectives for this session, like I said, are to define behavioral science and why should you care about behavioral science. How do we change behavior, and defining the behavior and changing behavior using the COM-B model, which is the model that we use in the behavior change unit. They touched upon it in the previous presentation when they talk about opportunity being one of the elements of this model of behavior change. And then I'll give some examples of behavioral science approaches applied to environmental issues. So, and there's going to be, I think, time at the end for questions, so I'll just leave those at the end. So first of all, what is behavioral science? Behavioral science is the study of human behavior. And basically what this means is a kind of like fancy way of saying that with behavioral science, we seek to understand how we think, interact with others, and how we make decisions in everyday life. So us as behavioral scientists, we try to use theories and tools from a wide range of disciplines in the social sciences to understand why people behave the way they do. And of course, we need to understand why they're doing what they're doing in order to be able to potentially and positively change it. So why should you care about behavioral science? Well, if you basically need people to do something differently to achieve your outcomes, then essentially you are relying on people changing their behavior. So if you say we want people to do this, then essentially you want people to change their behavior. And sometimes people might say, oh, but people actually have all the information they need. Why is it that they're not doing what we're telling them to do? So anytime if you have that kind of considerations, then you're already in the realm of behavior change. And usually, you do behavior change also with a lot of people at the same time. So you do it with project stakeholders. In our case at HCC, we have to do it together with county council and district and borough colleagues, partner organizations, but also residents sometimes need to change their behavior for us to achieve our outcomes in the county. So, so why should you care about behavior change? I guess from our point of view is, you need to be working with specialists. So if in your projects, you probably work with a variety of different specialists to achieve your outcomes. So if you need to build a bridge, then you go to an urban planner. If you need to create an app, like for example, they did for the NHS, for the COVID vaccine, they created an app. So maybe they went to a software engineer. And usually if you need to do things within a certain timeline, usually you would go to a project manager. So basically, if you need to change behavior, then maybe you would go to a behavioral science specialist or to a behavioral scientist. So how do you actually change behavior? First of all, you need to define the behavior that needs changing. So you need to define who, what, when, and how often. So who needs to change the behavior? What do they need to change? What do we need them to do differently? When do they need to do it? But also how often do they need to do it? So what is the frequency that we are aiming for? In this example, I took the example of parents idling outside of schools. And so you could say we want parents to stop idling when they're dropping off or picking up their kids from school. Maybe we want them to do it when they are parked inside or near the school. And ideally, we would want them to do this behavior every school day. So yeah, first step is to absolutely define the behavior, because once you define it, then you have a precise target and you can go about doing all the analysis and understanding why people are doing something and how you can change it. So in terms of using behavioral science, this is the model that we use in the behavior change unit at HCC. We use the COMBI model, and the COMBI basically it's an acronym, and it stands for the 3 factors that have been identified as being crucial in changing behavior. And these are capability, motivation, and opportunity. So capability refers to the psychological, physical ability to do the behavior. So for example, you know, if you want people to cycle, do they know about cycle lanes that are close to them? Or even like in terms of physical ability, you know, do they actually have the level of fitness that is required for them to cycle to work? Some people might not have that physical ability. Then motivation, which can be reflective or automatic. And I will get into like the actual sort of elements that make up these 3 influences later on. And then we have opportunity, which is basically, you know, you can think about opportunity in terms of does the physical and social environment actually pose a barrier to the behavior, or is it like facilitating the behavior? So it might be, I don't know, you want to get a Tesla, but if there are any, I don't know, superchargers near your house, maybe, you know, you would go for maybe a different kind of electric vehicle, or maybe you wouldn't go for the electric vehicle at all because like the environment around you doesn't really like, it doesn't facilitate your behavior, actually poses a barrier to your behavior. It makes it harder in a way. So this is, I won't get unfortunately into like a definition of all the elements because, you know, you could have a session on basically each one of these, but it's just to show you the complexity of when we are in the behavior change unit and we're doing an analysis of a behavior we want to change. We basically try to analyze each single behavior based on all these elements. And for each of these elements, we try to ask ourselves, for example, if you go into like opportunity and social, we ask ourselves, what is the social norm? What are like the neighbors doing? What is the culture? Like, what is the cultural norm in this country? So, for example, think about cycling in the Netherlands as opposed to like cycling in the UK. Cycling in the Netherlands is something that is like really normalized in society. That's the norm. So yeah, this is just to show the complexity. And when we're doing an analysis, we will go through each of these and understand what are the barriers. And also what, like, can these barriers be turned into like facilitators? How can we facilitate this behavior for these elements specifically? And these are just some examples to further like consolidate what I was discussing before. So capability, for example, physical capability, the behavior that we're asking people to do, does it match the current level of fitness? In the case of cycling, for example, do people have the skills? Can people actually ride a bike? And then psychological, do they know what cycle paths are available nearby? Do they know the quickest and safest way to and from work? Then we get into opportunity. So opportunity, as we saw in the table before, can be broken down into physical and social. So in terms of physical opportunity, are there actually any cycle paths close to their house? So this is not actually about knowledge anymore, but it's actually about like the physical presence in the environment of something that can facilitate the behavior. And then social, what do their friends say or believe about cycling? What do they see other people in the neighborhood doing? And what is the culture in the UK on cycling to work, like I said before. Then moving into the last element, which is motivation. This can be broken down into reflective and automatic. So an example of reflective motivation barrier could be someone saying, oh, I don't want to cycle, what if it rains? Because if we go back, you can see that something in there is like the beliefs about the consequences. So if someone says, oh, I don't want to cycle, what if it rains? You know, that's a barrier around the beliefs about consequences. So the belief of what will happen as a result of me doing the behavior. And this can be actually, you know, like actual consequences or even just like perceived consequences. So even if someone just has the perception that that can happen, that could like, you know, like unmotivate someone from doing the behavior. And then we have automatic motivation. So the people whose behavior we're trying to change, what habits do they currently have? Are they mainly drivers? because if they have other habits, it's very hard to sort of like break existing habits and then allow them the time to form new habits to sort of like take the place of the old habits. And also in terms of emotion, do they get positive feelings from driving as opposed to cycling? So for example, driving is reliable and comfortable, whereas cycling is unpredictable and uncomfortable. This is some work that the Hampshire County Council did in terms of trying to understand what kind of positive environmental change behaviors are more likely not only to like take place, so how likely is that someone will actually do these kind of positive like pro-environmental behaviors, but also what is like the carbon impact of these behaviors. So they did a research where they tried to understand the intersection between these two elements. So they wanted to see what actions are the most, like bring about the most savings in terms of like carbon, but also which ones are like the easiest behavior to change. So what they did is, beside the carbon calculator, they also did some online surveys and also some qualitative focus groups with people in order to ask them, you know, this is what we think. So based on the carbon calculator, we think that these are the behaviors that can bring about the most impact. But then they went to people and they asked them, how likely are you to actually do this? And so this brings sort of like the behavior change element into this. And just to give you the results, unfortunately, there's like there isn't a lot of time to get into this, but if you can see in the middle, there's some behaviors that usually are highly targeted by policies, also like in HCC, trying to reduce food waste, reduce meat consumption, or use water saving devices. How do we get people to use less water? But if you can see actually at the bottom, it says key takeout, changing behaviors should be measured against relative carbon impact. Example, if an initiative gets 229 times more people to use less water than a similar initiative gets people to install renewable energy, then that's the same value. So what this means is that like, actually, you only need one person in the green, for example, to install renewable energy devices in their home, like heat pump or solar, to get the same carbon impact of having people actually, correctly recycle materials or using less water. So, and this is basically the result of the combination, not just from the carbon calculation, but the carbon calculation combined with the likelihood of behavior change. Right, so I think this is like my last slide, and then I'll open up for questions. But basically, what we do in HCC, in the behavior change unit, we start for the outcomes and we work backwards. So we say, okay, what do we want to achieve? We want to achieve X. So then we ask ourselves, what is the behavior that needs to change in order for us to achieve this outcome that we want? Okay, and then we define the behavior, like we said. Once the behavior is defined, then we work backwards to the influences. So we say, okay, what are the capability, motivation, and opportunity barriers that are preventing this behavior from happening? Because if we don't act on the influences, we will not get the behavior change. And if we don't do that, then we don't get the outcomes that we want. And so what most people do is actually they just draw a straight line from interventions to outcomes. So they do something and they expect the outcomes. So they just, implement an intervention, for example, and then they expect the intended outcomes. Whereas what we do is we try to start from the outcomes that we want and then work backwards to the behaviors and then backwards to what influences that behavior. And yeah, I mean, that's it. I can open up for questions.
Probably best if you stop sharing your screen.
Yeah,
and we
sure.
can see everybody. Okay. Well, thanks so much, Ludovico. That was, I thought, an interesting presentation. Questions? Gerald.
So, thank you, Chairman. Sorry to keep asking questions. Isn't it better, maybe the answer to this is yes anyway, when I tell you, ask the question, isn't it better to actually put together a strategy with government, local authorities as to what you want to achieve in terms, for example, you're talking about cycling all the time, which is obviously very topical and very worthwhile. But unless you have the facilities to make it cycle lanes and all the rest of it to cycle, you can motivate people and do all the things you want to do, but it will be unsuccessful, and therefore all that energy is wasted. But don't you really need to do both? Set up the structure for these desirable things, then figure out how you're going to get people to use them? That's the question.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that's a great question. And usually, actually, we do have a couple of slides, like in the extended version of this presentation, we have a couple of slides where we talk about the integration of hard and soft measures, which are like necessary to achieve the behavior change, like you said. Because it might be that, for example, people are motivated, but the cycle lanes are not there. And then, like you said, you can motivate people all you want, but they don't have the physical opportunity to do the behavior. But it's also true that the opposite can happen. You might have a lot of opportunity in the environment, so you might have a lot of cycle lanes, but then if you're not motivating people in the right way, then you still wouldn't get the behavior because of a lack of soft measures instead of a lack of hard measures, for example. So definitely. Yes, sorry.
I mean, I guess that the position with the cycleways in Stevenage is a fine example of that, isn't there? You know, the older bits of Stevenage have a magnificent cycle network, but almost nobody uses it. And that's presumably just they're not motivated to. Is that the issue?
I'm sorry, I lost you there for a moment.
So I was saying, you know, next door to North Harts in Stevenage, we have an example of somewhere where there is a lot of cycling infrastructure, to keep using cycling as an example, but actually it's very little used.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I guess it would be hard to sort of like do a behavioral diagnosis like now and like in this moment, say what the issue is. But certainly it might be, you know, as a survey ever been done to sort of like ask residents of Stevenage if they know about them, if they know like what the issues is that they don't know about them? Is it that like they think that they're not safe? For example, you know, there might be a motivational issue there. And maybe they know about them, they perceive them as not safe.
Mike.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the presentation, Ludovico, and apologies that you're missing the Azzurri this evening. I was just wondering about, so changing behaviours within the county. I'm assuming that you measure the outcomes in some way for each of the initiatives you're trying to put forward. And then if you're doing that, then do you learn from different initiatives onto you know, which methods to change behaviour have been more successful, maybe which haven't been, or is there some sort of like retroactive thinking there?
Yeah, again, great question. Yeah, so UNIT is basically like really young. It was founded at the end of 2019, and basically when we went like in the first year, the pandemic hit, and so we didn't really have like a lot of projects. Didn't really get into like the evaluation stage. I think like one of the projects that we're leading on is currently in the intervention planning stage. So we did all the behavioral analysis, and now we're moving into the intervention implementation. But what I think is that usually what we do in behavior change, we adopt and like you said, a test, learn, and adapt approach. So what we do is we would do the behavioral analysis. We would agree, for example, with the project team, what are some feasible recommendations that can be implemented. We, of course, monitor them once they're being implemented. We collect, of course, some data. And then what we do is, you know, we look at that to see if we're in the right direction. And then when the project is complete, we also try to put out some case studies to, for example, say, oh, actually, it turns out that for this project, it was a combination of motivation and capability that was the issue. For example, a combination of physical opportunity and, for example, physical capability, for example. So it would depend on every single project. But yeah, something like behavior change, I guess it's really hard, even if you do a project around that, for it to be like completely 100% transferable to another context. But it's possible.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Amy.
This might be a question, this might also be a rambling thought. With regards to behavioural change, what behaviour or whose behaviour did you specifically model this on? I hope that makes sense.
So do you mean as in who is like the end user, like, oh, the person that whose behavior we're trying to influence? Like, is it residents? Is that like, so it's at what level we are applying that?
Basically, yes, but also with regards to behavioural change, have you considered the how you change the behaviour of someone who's not neurotypical?
Who is not? Sorry, I didn't get the last part.
Neurotypical.
Right. I guess like this is a model that you could apply like in every context and every like with residents. You can also use it like you can also apply it for a project that's like internal organization, colleagues. It doesn't really, so it can be applied in any context with any sort of person, because when you do the behavioral analysis, that will sort of bring out what the barriers are. And so because the barriers are unique to every single context and every single sort of like group of people or organization, or, you know, then that will sort of guide your diagnosis and your understanding and also your interventions. So I guess it's more about the process. It's about like trusting the process of applying behavior change, rather than, you know, having like a tailored model for each context and individual. I guess it's I guess in a way the model is just like one side of things that we do, but also what we do is also we do an analysis of the literature. We go to the literature and see what's already available and see, you know, there's something that we can use. Yeah.
That's brilliant. Thank you. No, I really appreciate that.
I guess populations are not homogeneous, so presumably the behaviour reacts in different ways to the interventions you make. John.
You're on mute, John.
Sorry. There's an illusion in our discussion that the capability, the motivation and opportunity are something, are a tool for government to use to bring about behaviour change, whereas actually they pre-exist, which I think was part of the message that really wasn't brought out. In other words, where the public have the capability, are motivated and see the opportunity, they'll get on with it without waiting for government. And the prime example of that at the moment is e-scooters. If you want to look up the government's position, Government for England, as I call it, e-scooter trials guidance for users is on the DFT site, DFT, Department for Transport. And it of course bans the use of electronic scooters, but conducts trials in certain metropolitan areas as to whether they might in fact be a jolly good thing and lots of fun, which might just be why people are taking them up and use them. They're more or less affordable, but even if they aren't, when's that stopped anybody who really wants to do something? And I think that that's a very interesting case study, that if you put the infrastructure into place, it's liable to be filled with 15 mile an hour or deregulated e-scooters even, regardless of the law. Question, what do you think of that?
I think that sometimes even us as behavioral scientists, we are surprised as to why people do things. We just accept them and try and sort of like run with that, to use a metaphor. But I guess sometimes people do things for like very trivial reasons. I can give you an example. Like there's something like the IKEA effect, for example. A company wasn't selling much of their cakes because they were already like pre-made, for example. Then what they did was they actually broke it down in like multiple, like different steps, and someone actually had to take something out of the packet, mix it together to make the cake. And so then sales went up just because people were doing something themselves. And it was like exactly the same thing, but you know, people wanted to feel like they were contributing towards actually making the cake. And so sometimes it's just these kind of biases that guide people.
Okay. So, Amy, is that a new hand?
No, sorry, that's a legacy hand.
Okay. Are there any more questions, Ludovico? Okay. I think there was some really interesting things in there that are very relevant to the ways in which we're trying to persuade large numbers of people to change their behaviour in order to reduce their carbon emissions or improve biodiversity or cut their water consumption. And clearly persuading some of them to change their behaviour is very easy. But when one gets beyond a certain point, it becomes, I guess, more complex. So thanks so much for taking us through some of the thinking behind that. And clearly this is not an opportunity for us to go into great detail about a specific requirement, but I think it's useful for us to understand the sort of things that are needed to be done, and that just either putting in place the physical measures or creating an ability to use them is probably not enough on its own, and we need to think about the whole picture. So thanks so much for your input on that. We're now going to move on to Annie Sander, who is going to talk to us about the Cambridge carbon footprint calculator.
Sorry, Steve, I did actually put my hand back up to ask
something. Sorry.
But
yeah, go ahead.
Actually, this was something I was going to ask, but I pulled it back because I thought it might be slightly controversial, but I am going to ask it. Ludovico, what do you think about the idea of people very much agreeing, yes, people need to change their behaviour, yes, people need to change their behaviour, and not realising it's they themselves that need to change their behaviour? How do you get that past the thinking everybody else needs to do something and it's the problem of the public, and not realizing that you are the public and you are a person and you are one of the people who probably needs to change I know I need to change my behavior for things. Definitely there is always improvements that can be made. I'm going to sit here and openly say that, but how do you, when it comes to people who are insisting that other people need to change and it's also them and they don't realize that? That was a very long rambling question. I'm very sorry. And Annie, I'm very sorry also for interrupting you.
It's quite a good question, isn't it, Ludovico?
Yeah, that is a brilliant question. I would ask all of us to think about our families and the things we want them to do differently. And we live with them all our life and we still don't get them sometimes to change their behavior. So I guess that is like really difficult. And in the couple of years that I worked in HCC, sometimes in some projects, you need to change the behavior of the people that you're working with to actually get to the behavior change stage, like you said. So it's kind of like you have to apply behavior change to be able to apply behavior change. I guess, I don't know if I have an answer for you. I just know that like it's really hard. But as a behavioral scientist, I guess you always have it at the back of your mind to analyze also your behavior and say, you know, if I was in this person's shoes, like what would get me to like do this, or what would get me to do this differently, and would I do it? And sort of like start from yourself, because I think ultimately you face the like similar issues to other people, and sometimes it's about having the like stepping out and having that outsider perspective and think, oh, would I actually do I actually like these comms piece? Do I actually like this messaging, do I think they will work, or like would it work with me? So maybe it's about sort of like sense checking yourself against the things that you're developing is what I'll say, I guess.
Okay, thanks very much.
Really
Yeah.
great, thank you. I've found this absolutely fascinating. I have many questions that I'd love to sort of sit and chat about regarding this, but obviously this isn't time. But I would love to talk to you again around behaviour, because I'm fascinated by it.
Sure. I mean, I think you have my details in the invite, and so we can follow up outside of this. And actually, I wanted to give my availability also. If any of you comes up with other questions and you want to collate them, I can always come back to you in an email.
Great, thanks very much for that offer. I suspect there will be some more questions, for which inevitably we won't think about until after the end of the meeting, but I think that's a really useful introduction to a subject that we probably all need to think about more. Okay, so this time we are really going to move on to Annie. I'm sorry about that. Sorry for the delay, Annie. So once again, Annie Sander is going to talk to us about the Cambridge Carbon Footprint Calculator. Annie, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Share my screen. So hi everyone, you've seen me on this panel a couple of times with my different hats on, and today it's my professional hat. So I'm a project manager. That's actually how I earn my money. So I'm a project manager, and I currently work at Cambridge Carbon Footprint, a small charity, and I'm going to based in Cambridge, and I'm going to tell you a bit more about what we do. So I'm happy to be here and talk to you about the Cambridge Climate Change Charter, a bit of a mouthful, so we usually just call it the 4 Cs or the Charter. A project which I've been involved in last year, and which I led on behalf of Cambridge Carbon Footprint. So the objectives of the Charter were basically 2 things: raise awareness and help people to take action on climate change. So that's what these 2 main objectives are saying. So the Cambridge City Council put out the objectives that they wanted to create a charter. They had a charter before 13 years ago, in 2007, and it generated a bit of action, but then it kind of faded out. So they wanted to pick that idea up again, to create a charter and get people to sign up and take action. So they, as North Harts did as well, they declared a climate emergency, and as part of that, they wanted to support their residents and their businesses and their organizations to take action on climate change. So they put out a tender from which I've stolen these words, these objectives, and Cambridge Carbon Footprint applied for that project. And Cambridge Carbon Footprint has been around for a while. As I said, it's a teeny tiny local charity based in Cambridge, most known for initiatives like Open Eco Homes, where people open their houses to the public and talk to the public about how they have made their homes more eco-friendly, like heating and so on. And another big thing that we are known for are repair cafes. So Cambridge Carbon Footprint have run the then biggest repair cafe in the world. So that's the picture on the bottom right. And we keep doing it, and we keep supporting initiatives across Cambridgeshire and Hertfordshire to put on repair cafes as well. We're running the Sustainable Fashion Festival, which had to be paused last year, but it was quite successful the years before that. And so Cambridge Carbon Footprint in numbers in 2019, because of course 2020 was a bit different, but in 2019 we managed to put on 68 events, engaged with almost 7,000 people, and or had attendees engaged with us, 7,000 attendees, engaged with 4,500 new people through these events, and saved around 2,000 tons of CO2 by helping people take action on climate change. So our approach is basically achieving carbon reduction through positive action and through climate leadership. So so everything we do is around making a positive difference, making it accessible to everyday residents, and empowering them to take leadership. So when the tender came out for the charter, it was a perfect fit for our organization. So so the tender came out in late 2019. We won it, and then we delivered the project in 2020. We designed and developed the charter, and then we launched it in September 2020. It was supposed to go live in June 2020, but we all know that things got a bit delayed last year. And this year we are continuing the work with the Cambridge City Council through our From Ambition to Action webinars, which I'm going to talk about a bit later as well. So what were we asked to actually deliver? So the charter should be based online. It should provide a list of actions for people to pledge, and not only individuals, but also businesses and organizations. All the information should be accessible online through the web. We were asked to run a communications campaign as well, and run public events to engage the residents and spread the word, and also to ongoing events to help people to sign up to the charter. Of course, all of that had to be slightly changed during the course of the pandemic, but that was pretty much the idea. And then at the end, there was a monitoring and evaluation element of monitoring how many people and how many organizations actually signed up, and how much of a difference we're making. We've built in an assessment, a very rough assessment of how much carbon the actions that were pledged are going to save. So I was hired as a project manager specifically for this project, and most of the work was then done by CCF, so Cambridge Carbon Footprint volunteers, by the team. Because we've been around for such a long time, we have a lot of very knowledgeable volunteers from the university, from different engineering backgrounds, and we were able to draw on their experience to help us create the charter, create the calculator. And we also linked up with other organizations like CampCycle or Cambridge Sustainable Food. And we hired an external web designer, so an agency to do the actual web design. And of course, we worked with the council to deliver the project. So in the end, this is the charter. That's what came out of it. So it's based on our CCF website. I'm going to put a link into in the chat after the presentation, so you can have a look around. And as you can see, it basically divides up into individuals and households and businesses and organizations. So the charter is slightly tailored differently towards these different types of users. So we have created, for the individuals and households, we have created a carbon footprint calculator that had been in the pipeline for a couple of for a bit, and this project was really the ignition that we needed to get it done and put it on the website. So with the charter, which is signing a pledge to take action, comes a calculator supporting individuals and households to calculate their carbon footprint. For the businesses, we don't have our own calculator, but there are some tools that we point businesses to get a better understanding of their carbon footprints. So when individuals decide to calculate their carbon footprint, and we do encourage them to first calculate their carbon footprint to get a better understanding of what their emissions actually look like, what are actually the areas of their life that create the most emissions. We ask them a series of questions in 4 different areas, that is food, home, energy, transport, and shopping. And it takes about 10-15 minutes, depending on the level of detail that you're going into with your answers. And then at the end, it gives you an overview of how much emissions your everyday lifestyle choices generate. And broken down into the different areas, so you know which one might be your biggest emission source. And we also provide them a goal. So given that we all want to get to net zero by 2050, we need to reduce our emissions substantially by 2030. So we don't use up all our carbon budget straight away, but we have to start now to reduce our carbon footprint. So this is just a little pointer to show people how much they actually need to reduce their carbon footprint from now on over the next couple of years. And then when people decide they are ready to take action, they are navigated through to the charter through the action. So this is not all of them. It's just a snapshot, but I invite you to have a look through in your own time. And again, it's broken down into the 4 different areas plus climate leadership. It gives you a pre-selection based on your carbon footprint. So if you, for example, said that you're eating a lot of meat, it might suggest that you eat less meat. If you said that you take flights, then it may suggest you take less flights, and so on. The stars indicate how effective behavior change might be and action might be. So switching to 100% renewable tariff might be very effective if you're on a regular tariff at the moment, or then at the same time switching only 1 car journey per week to cycling might not be that effective. It might be that you choose to do something else. Demonstrate climate leadership is then the social part of this. So we encourage people to pledge action to talk to their family about carbon emissions, talk to their employer, start educating themselves more around carbon emissions, and maybe join a local initiative, and so on. So the climate leadership is the social aspect of the behavior change. We then on the website provide support for all of the actions. So under each of the sections, you will find more information. For example, if you decided you want to eat more plant-based food, you will find links, you will find pages that show you a bit more around why this is a good idea, how it would save carbon emissions. And then further down, it also points you to other resources, or tries to help the user to make the action a success. So far, we have 72 individuals signed up and 14 businesses, but we are counting. So every week there are new people signing up. Again, given that we are still very limited in what we can do in regards to events and marketing and so on, it is good. It's obviously not as good as we were hoping it to be, but as I said, we are now getting ready to gear up and engage again and go out. For example, we had a stall last weekend where we presented this to people. So we're just getting now ready to do more of that engagement. And so far, we have saved 25 tons of CO2, or rather the residents and the businesses that have pledged to take action. So with every pledge, that will grow, how much CO2 will be saved. From the vision to action is, again, what I mentioned earlier. It's now this engagement, the events that are going on the site. So we've set up these webinars to help specifically businesses and organizations, but also residents to take action. So these webinars are designed to look in more detail on different aspects of decarbonization. And so they are running over the course of the year to help people and organizations that have signed up. We are at the same time running a new project. So I've actually stepped away from the charter work. So that's being done by other people in the organization. And I've picked up a new project that we're delivering for South Cambridgeshire District Council through their Zero Carbon Community Fund, which is called Net Zero Now. And for this project, we are running a training course for community leaders across South Cambridgeshire. So we have 16 community leaders on the course at the moment. We're actually doing our third session tomorrow on behavior change. So we're going to talk to them about behavior change, how to influence their residents' behavior. And we have parish councillors and church representatives, people from local schools and so on. So people that are already active in their communities, and we are talking to them about how to get climate action going in their community. And we're trying to provide them with the knowledge and the skills to make those that action successful in their local villages, in their parishes. So thank you very much, and keep the questions coming.
Okay, thank you, Annie. It's probably best if you stop sharing your screen, because then people can see more people.
Yeah, so sorry, I always struggle with dropping off the sharing. If someone else can share or take my sharing abilities away, thanks.
Okay, it's just we can see more people without the screen sharing. Yeah. Okay, thanks, Annie. So questions for Annie? Gerald.
Thank you, Chairman. Annie, thanks. It was very interesting. Just a question on the amount of CO2 that you saved. In 2019, and it's not a trick question. I'll try not to make it a trick question anyway. In 2019, you saved about 2,400 tons of CO2, which I guess is people that signed up for your charter in that year. And then currently, I guess it's down to the pandemic. If I understand it correctly, you've saved 25 tons, which is obviously an enormous difference. Do I understand that correctly? Is it the
no, the number for 2019 was before the charter. So the 25 is only through the charter, and the number that I mentioned earlier was through all the events that we're running, like repair cafes, open eco homes, workshops, and other consultations. We've estimated that we're saving, so for example, for every item that we save from landfill through the repair cafes, you can estimate a certain amount of CO2, and that's all of that put together.
So obviously you couldn't do all the outdoor stuff, which is why the savings are so much smaller.
No, the savings are completely different. They don't have anything to do. So the 25 is really only the charter, so what people have said through the charter. And the others is things that can't be or aren't captured.
Okay, so they don't relate to each other, really. Thank you.
Yeah. Amy.
Hi, Annie. So with regards to when you started this up, when you started the charter before the pandemic, people would have pledged to travel less and such. And then the pandemic hit and everyone had to travel less. So what has there been any look into enforce non-travel, i.e. enforce staying at home, and what the impact that has had? And would it be worthwhile to also include into that taking up opportunities to work from home as opposed to traveling to work, and enforcing those rights to be able to do that? Do you think that would factor into an element of being greener, includes being at home more, but by choice this time?
We do have an action in the charter, work from home and commute less It is already in there, and would definitely make a difference if less people commuted, especially in areas such North Herts and Cambridgeshire, where people do surprisingly often commute by car, or at least parts of their travel are done by car. So if you were able to replace at least part of that with working from home, then yeah, it would make a difference. So it can be part of a business sustainability plan to enable working from home more, definitely. So what we've done, for example, for the going back to the estimates for the 25,000 tons, 25 tons, for example, what we say is we roughly estimate for how much every action would save. So for the commuting, for the working from home, what we would say is a typical commute generates this much CO2 every day. If you stop doing that over 52 weeks, one day a week, then you would save this amount of carbon. So it would be quite straightforward to do the same for business to estimate that.
Okay, thanks. Right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Annie. Nice work. Sorry if I missed this, but is there an ask of the council with regards to this, maybe in terms of asking the council to sign up to the charter, or would you like us to promote it or something like that? Or both?
You mean for North Herts?
Yeah.
So the charter is open to everyone. So specifically, I guess especially residents in Royston might be relevant to residents in Royston who often travel more towards Cambridge, for example. So everyone can sign it. So North Herts would be, it would be open for North Herts to encourage their residents to sign it. We do share the data that is collected with the city council. The city council knows the rough postcodes of people that have signed up. So you could potentially get North Herts residents out of that database if you asked nicely. I don't know, but yeah, I mean, it might be an idea to start talking to city whether it's worth either partnering up or doing something similar. I mean, the calculator is pretty much some of the values that we use are very specific to Cambridge, but most of them are relevant across the southeast of England. So at the very least, the calculator is relevant in North Herts as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. I mean, I think I've been interested in the idea of getting some sort of calculator that people in North Herts can use, because I think people understanding what their own position is. It comes back to the question Amy asked earlier about, how do we get people from saying someone was doing something about this to I must do something about this. And I think for people to understand their present position and what changes they can make, even if they're only incremental changes, I think is useful. I must admit, it's one of the things that I'm not clear whether or not we should do just for North Herts, or whether or not it's something where we should collaborate with the rest of the county and HCPSP. And I think that's something that we perhaps need to think about, but it's certainly an interesting thing to explore, I think. I mean, I guess, is there any mechanism built in to evaluate what the actual change in behaviour is? You ask people to make pledges, but lots of us make pledges to ourselves at the start of every year, which often don't make February, do they? So what's the process for evaluating what the actual result is, as opposed to what people hope the result is going to be?
At the moment there's nothing built in, but there are two things that we do is we ask people to leave their email address if they want us to get in touch. So that signs them up to a newsletter, but it will also mean that we can contact them and ask them how they are doing.
Right.
That is something that we're looking forward to do, to get a bit of feedback, how people are getting on, what they're struggling with. And then the other thing is, so at the moment you can't go back in and say that you're doing it a second time. You basically, you can download your result. So for example, if you've done it in January, you can go back in July and do it again and see what difference that those 6 months have made in your habits. And we will probably ask people to do that. But just because of the way that it's set up, we don't want people to have to log in and that sort of thing. You can't do it automatically compared, but because people can download their results, it should be pretty straightforward to compare later on.
Okay, that's really interesting. And I guess, I mean, are you the only people doing this, or are there others doing similar things in other parts of the country?
There was someone in Derbyshire who's done this like 10 years ago, but that again, that faded out a bit after they've done this really successfully. But calculators, there are a couple around. So the most commonly known is, for example, the WWF one, which is quite good. But as for a local authority to offer their residents a calculator and a charter all in one, I think this is a first. A charter, yes, or a pledge, or a call to action has been done, but not with a calculator.
Okay. Okay, John, you've got your hand up.
Yes, just a quick comment. Some of the calculators available online are very quick and simple to use, but you're liable to find that they're too simple, making assumptions, and that things you've said, actually, there's more to it than that. So I'd highly recommend the Cambridge initiative for taking account of local circumstances and really thinking it through in advance. Unless a model is quite complex and is not a matter of a couple of minutes to tick some boxes, unless it's of that sort of standard, I wouldn't actually recommend doing it, other than as a quick thinking tool, a motivational thing. But for serious purposes, especially if one builds in comparison and measuring, then what Annie outlined is the way to go, in my view.
It's definitely not an auditing tool. That's definitely right. It is rough estimates, but it's designed to do exactly what Steve said, give people some food for thought and start them off on their journey. And it works really well, just getting people shocked at, oh, wow, this is how much home energy I'm using, or this is how much influence it will have if I'm cutting out one flight. It's a conversation starter.
Yeah, I guess there's inevitably a trade-off between accuracy and whether or not people will do it. If it's too complicated, people will get bored and give up and say, I'll come back to it next week, and they never get around to it. So there's clearly a trade-off there, isn't there? Okay, well, that was really interesting too. So we've had some really interesting presentations this evening. I mean, it says the next item on the agenda is public participation to receive petitions. Well, there aren't any of those. Comments and questions from the public. We've had comments and questions from everyone all the way through. Are there any more comments and questions that we've not already covered? From anyone? Mike?
Sorry, me again. No, just back to the last section then. Is there a way that we could get something like that for maybe North Herts is too small, but for Herts, some sort of charter or carbon calculator? I don't know if that falls under what Georgina was talking about earlier.
So I think we should investigate that. Ruben?
It's on my list to pick up with the coordinator of the HCCSP. So yes, Mike, we will pick it up.
Brilliant, thanks.
I think I did send an email to the leader of the carbon subgroup about this, but I think it's the kind of thing where they said it would be sort of like a sub action or something that would come out of the current actions around behaviour change in the plan. But we can make sure that we keep.
Well, it might be a thing on which we wanted to be the leader. I don't mean the leader of the carbon group, but you know, as I said earlier, I think an important thing about the HCCSP is it enables people to get more done and get more done more quickly. And you know, there's real scope for piloting things in places. We don't want to go at the speed of the slowest. We want to.
Yes.
I think that's something that is well worth in investigating. And you know, clearly, if we were to decide we wanted to go ahead with something like this, we would have a different sort of conversation with Annie or Annie's organisation, amongst others, which clearly we can't do this evening. But I think there's some really interesting ideas there, and I think it's one of the things. I think, you know, looking at the sort of things that we've talked about tonight, I think looking at what we can do in terms of something along the lines of a calculator and a charter is one of the actions that we ought to take forward. I think there was also the very interesting issue about what we can do in terms of EV charging and in terms of establishing what there is in the district that we don't know about. And I think, you know, we're talking about how we change behaviour, and if we're taking an interest in that, that may encourage others to take an interest in it. So those are two things I think we should look at how we can take forward. Are there other suggestions as to things we should be doing as a result of what we've heard this evening? Michael.
Thank you, Chair. I certainly think we should investigate, Annie, the cost of doing something like that for North Herts and whether her company would take that on for North Herts. I think those negotiations should start now and see whether we can make something of it. Thank you.
Yes, we need to be aware of the need to follow the procurement rules, Michael, but I understand what you're trying to achieve. And yes, I think we should try and do something. Are there any other suggestions? This falls under item 11, the discussion regarding contributions, which it says I'm going to lead. Then I think it's now approaching 9:15, so I'd like us to focus on what actions we think the council should be taking going forward. Are there any more in addition to the ones we've already discussed? I'll take that as a no then. Well, thanks very much for your contributions. Thanks very much to our presenters tonight. I think we've had some really interesting presentations and some things to think about as well as some things to do. So thank you all for your participation and we'll see you all next time. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
See you later. Bye.